infrastructure is usually long-term investment with much longer payback period and greater risk. So what challenges do you see in infrastructure investment, and how IFC addresses these challenges?
So I think that's a very valid point you raise, because one of the biggest challenges is the perception that infrastructure is a risky asset class. If you actually look at global numbers, infrastructure is one of the least risky asset classes if it's done correctly. And that's key, is how do you do it? So the way we look at infrastructure is it's a long-term play, and that's what we're in the business of. We're in the business of long-term development. So the challenge is, how do we move the perception that infrastructure is a risky asset class to that infrastructure is actually a relatively safe asset class. Now, some of the things that I want to lay here is that bankers keep saying that projects are not bankable. Governments say this is the best we can do. So we actually have a gap here. This is what bankers or investors want. This is where governments are coming. How do we close that gap? So one thing that we as the World Bank Group are trying to do is, how do we de-risk some of these projects? And there are many different ways that we can do that.
You share lots of useful information. So can you give us some advice for our Chinese companies? You know, recently it's a growing trend for Chinese companies to going abroad. What's your advice for Chinese companies who want to tap the overseas market?
So I have to say, I'm not the one who should be giving advice, but I think there are few, what I would say, rules or areas that we focus on, or I focus on, when we're going to a new country. So I think the first and fundamental one is we need to be making sure that we're there for the long term. So you need to be committed when you're going to a country. You need to ensure that that's a country you are going to be staying with. It's not about investing today and exiting tomorrow and making quick money. And I think that is a fundamental sort of pillar for us, and that's what I would suggest. The second is really understanding the culture and how they do business. One of the concerns one has when any company goes overseas is we're all used to doing things in our own home markets. And we think that's the right way. Now, the way we've done things in our home markets is not necessarily how you're going to be able to be successful when you're going to a new market. And I think that is very important.
So for the last question, President Xi said we'll increase the support on Belt and Road construction funds. What's your comments?
So I think that is really great news, that there's going to be more capital available to invest in the Belt and Road countries. I would add a slightly different point to that the needs in the Belt and Road countries is huge. And there's a lot of talk on the SDGs now, how do we go from billions to trillions? And if a little bit of those funds that President Xi announced yesterday, if some of it that can be used to actually de-risk projects, and as a result of that we will be able to attract even more capital from the outside. And that should be the ultimate objective. It's not about what we can do with the money that's been announced, but we would like to try and see in our own little way, how can we use a little bit of that money to de-risk some of the projects that are there, the more complicated projects, the more complex projects, and be able to attract more private commercial capital into those projects. And we'd love to be given an opportunity to work with the government to do that.